Good morning, St. Mark. Thank you for letting me preach this morning like this. I'm actually in Helsinki, Finland at the moment, where over the weekend I was able to talk about Jesus to 14,000 high school students. And yet I'm on video because, well, I just had to be the one to share this message with you. Today we are wrapping up our series called The Good Life. Now, when we started this series, I said, look, we're all chasing after some form of the good life. We're all chasing a life where our needs are met and our joy is full. And that's not a bad thing. In fact, we learned that it's a good thing, a God thing even. Jesus himself encourages us to go after the good life. However, we also learned that Jesus defines the good life in a very specific way. According to Jesus, the good life we are to go after is one where we are rich in God. A truly satisfying life is one where we are filled to overflow with the things that matter to God and which last forever. And then last week, we talked about rooting ourselves deeply in those kind of riches. I shared about how we're called to hold on tightest to Jesus and to hold everything else loosely so that we can share generously. And that as we share, as we sow, as we give into the things that matter to God, including the mission of the church, we entrench ourselves deeper into the heart of God. We become rooted more deeply into Jesus. So today, I want to close out this series by asking you a very important question. Are you ready? Here it is. Are you a consumer? Or are you a cultivator? Another question for you. Do you remember littering? Like do you remember when littering was a big problem? Think like 1983. Remember that? Me too. If you're too young to know this, what I need you to know is that as a society, we used to just drop our trash on the ground outside. Like it was a problem. Done with that soda? Finish that candy bar? Roll down the window, toss it outside. It was a thing. In 1982, if you were driving down the highway and you saw someone toss a wrapper out their window, you'd be like, yeah, that happens. By the way, do we have anything that we need to throw away? But now, if you saw that happen on the highway, you would speed up behind them, record them with your phone, and call them out on TikTok. What I'm saying is our attitude about littering has changed. Here's what's happening inside someone's mind when they litter. When you litter, when you throw your trash on the ground, you're thinking only of yourself. You're thinking only of that moment. My needs are met. I'll toss it behind me as I focus on what's in front of me. And changing that collective attitude was hard. I don't know if you remember, but it took years to get us as a society to be more concerned about the experience of others who come after you, walking along that trail or driving along that road, and the long-term impact of the choices that are being made by you. Now, I bring that up because one of the reasons I think that so many of us struggle to step into the good life, to be rich and rooted in the things of God, is because we are caught up in a littering mindset. Go with me on this. We are hyper-focused on our experience, on our needs. And we seek to soak up as many good things that we can get our hands on. Money, applause, physical pleasures, homes, cars, with very little regard to how our lifestyle impacts others around us, or the people who come after us, or the long-term effects, for good or for bad, on the world that's left behind by us. To put it bluntly, we struggle to enter the good life because we are simply consumers. Consumers have an appetite that never slows down and a focus that never looks beyond themselves. A consumer only wants to plant seeds that bear fruit for me as fast as possible. I want more money in my pocket now. I want more professional opportunity for myself now. I want better behaved kids, a happier marriage, a healthier body, a nicer ride right now. And stuff that doesn't sprout for me quickly or benefit me primarily doesn't really interest me. I'll toss it to the side. I'm a consumer. And the Bible has harsh words for those who can't see beyond themselves. Just an example from the book of Proverbs, Solomon says this: "A good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children, but the sinner's wealth is laid up for the righteous." In other words, a well-lived life is one where there is consideration for the needs and the well-being of those who come long after you. Now, let's contrast that with the life of a cultivator, which, as we'll see, is what Jesus calls us to. A cultivator cares less about getting his and more about producing a harvest for others. In Matthew 25, Jesus tells a story about a man with lots of possessions who went on a long journey. And while he was away, he entrusted a portion of his treasures to 3 different servants. While he was gone, and he was gone a long time, 2 of the servants took the master's treasure entrusted to them, and they made more of what the master loved. But one decided differently. He decided to hold on to the treasure that he'd been given. He decided not to leverage it, not to multiply it, but to sit on it. Quite literally, he buried it, Jesus says. And so the master comes back and he's like, "Okay, what'd you do with the things I entrusted to you?" And of course, he's really pleased with the 2 who took what he'd given them and doubled it. But when it came to the 3rd guy, the master was upset. He said, "Are you telling me that you did nothing with what I've given to you? You didn't try to cultivate any more of this?" And then the master's like, "Get out of here. I can't stand evil, lazy people." And then Jesus says the master sent him to the outer darkness, which I'm going to assume is not good. Jesus' point is this: if you belong to him, then the stuff you have is not really yours. Your time, your treasure, your talents have been entrusted to you for a while he's away. They really belong to him. They're on loan to you from him. And they haven't been given to you to merely consume for your own good. He expects us to use that which belongs to him to grow, to harvest, to cultivate more of what matters to him. And in the end, Jesus says, there will be an accounting, and those who cultivated will be celebrated on the last day. Now, an important aside about that last day. I can say with all certainty that that last day where Jesus comes back and there is an accounting will be a good day for you and for me. Even though both of us have failed to be faithful cultivators, even though we have wildly consumed in our life, that last day will still be a good day for you. I know that it will be good for us because of what Christ himself has done for us, what he's done for you. The beautiful thing is that as Jesus tells this story about the judgment that awaits unfaithful stewards, he knows full well that he's going to be cast out into the outer darkness for us all. That's what his death on the cross was. It was the Father fast-forwarding to Judgment Day. On the cross, God proactively and substitutionally paid for our collective consumerism through the death and resurrection of his perfect Son. Jesus was treated like the worthless servant so that now justice has been done, and so that now on the actual Judgment Day, you and I who belong to Jesus, who have faith in Jesus, we will be treated and celebrated, received into the Master's joy as though we have been fully faithful, cultivating stewards and servants. And that promise, that truth, is meant to set you and me free. Think about this. God in Christ has met our greatest need to be forgiven, to be part of the Father's family, and we are. And so now, we don't need to hoard and harvest only for ourselves. We can set our focus on the experience of those around us, and especially of those who come after us. I want to paint a picture of what that looks like. First, I want us to see side by side the difference between consumption and cultivation. Here's the things that are true for a consumer. A consumer uses, discards, demands fruit right now, lives for today, thinks first of their own gain. A cultivator, however, stewards, plants, waits patiently for the fruit that comes later, lives for generations, and thinks first of God's mission. Do you remember in week 1 when I talked about sowing and investing in the things that matter to God? If you remember that, you'll know that I mentioned 3 categories. First, the spread of the gospel, supporting the growth of faith in Jesus in your home and through your church. When you leverage what you've been entrusted to pray with your children, to talk about faith, to encourage regular attendance at church, to establish faith-filled relationships, there's benefit now for sure. When you leverage your resources to accomplish those things, there's benefit immediately for sure. But the best of what you're cultivating is down the road. When sadly, tragedy occurs, or the kids are older, but they have a heart full of faith with which they can cry out to God and from which they can draw wisdom and peace. When you give your first and best to the church that God has called you to, there's benefit now, right now, for sure. But the best of what you're cultivating is down the road. It's a harvest of people coming to faith here who are safe and welcomed here, just like you are today, in a space and by leaders that you may never know. Second, I mentioned the lifting up of others. When you give your blessings to lift the financial burden of a friend, or to take the time to write a word of encouragement to a coworker, or to perform an act of service for your elderly neighbor, there is immediate blessing to be had for sure. But you are also planting a seed in their heart that is going to grow. It's a seed that says, God provides, I am loved, I matter, which will cause them to be filled with peace the next time life is difficult for them. Or it will motivate them down the road to pay it forward to somebody else and multiply the blessing. Third, I talked about the righting of wrongs. When you give of your blessings to fight against evil, injustice, to right some terrible wrong today, there is blessing for somebody today for sure. But you're also putting a tiny hole in the dam of dysfunction that keeps our world reeling with evil. And you're helping hasten the day down the road when that dam finally breaks and all that's wrong is washed away. Now, to cultivate these things in the future, it will come at a cost to you today. That's true. And it doesn't directly necessarily bless you today. That's true. And the full impact of it may never be seen or experienced by you. But God, in the end, He will thank you. Decide today, what do you want to be about? Who do you want to be? Do you want to be primarily a consumer for yourself, or a cultivator for others? A consumer for yourself for today, for right now, or a cultivator for others for tomorrow? Did you know that I grew up in the country? It's true. I grew up in the middle of Michigan on 11 acres, and on that property we had a couple of barns, an apple orchard, a huge pond stocked with fish. On our property were several massive, giant oak trees. I'm talking trunks that are like 4+ feet in diameter. These trees had massive canopies, and they cast a huge amount of shade, and they had incredibly strong branches, from which my dad hung a tire swing sturdy enough to hold me and my 2 brothers all at once. Not far away was a small field that in June and July was filled with strawberries. As you can imagine, as a kid, this was great. In the summer, I could swing in the oak tree, nearly break an arm, then dash over to the field and pick a handful of fresh strawberries. What's interesting to me is that strawberries are a very fast fruit. From planting them to enjoying them is like 2 months, 3 at most. Now contrast that with the oak trees. Those things were planted at least 150 years earlier. It took a century and a half before they could offer all that shade and be home to that swing. Now, if you had to pick between one or the other, which would you plant? Strawberries or oak trees? Would you plant strawberries, which you could pick in a short amount of time and enjoy yourself? Or oak trees that will grow to be incredible, but whose full benefits you may never personally enjoy? If you're a follower of Jesus, the answer is oak trees. No offense to strawberries. We are to seek the harvest that will bless more than just us, that will endure long after us, and to do so eagerly, even though the thing we cultivate may never be fully enjoyed by us. Here's what I'm saying. Work for the future faith of your family. Work for the growth of God's church long after you're in the ground. Work for the peace of mind in others down the road and the inbreaking of justice in the future. Invest in those things. Give to those things. Cultivate those things. Child of God, forgiven follower of Jesus, plant the seeds that become the tree, that grows the canopy, that shades and cools someone else's skin, and which bears the branch that holds the swing that stirs someone else's joy and causes them to give praise to God. Don't just plant and pick berries for yourself. Anyone can consume. Instead, knowing that Christ has secured your future, plant some oaks for theirs. St. Mark, you've been given so much. What will you plant? What harvest will you cultivate that will outlive you? Who will sit in the shade of your faith long after you've gone to be with your Father? Who will have a better life in the future because you've chosen the truly good life today? Amen. Thanks, friends. I'll see you soon.